Okay, so if you're watching this video, thanks for buying our Z-Sync collars. And before you get started, you just want to take inventory of your package. You should have two Z-Sync collars. They should have the screws in the end for clamping them shut, and they should have the two set screws in these ends. If you don't have those, then you can't continue with the assembly. You should also have two toothpicks broken in half, Allen wrench, a tube of super glue, and the two dry belts. You're going to need all these things in order to do the installation. You'll need to provide your own Phillips screwdriver, but if you don't have these things, you won't be able to continue. Call us and let us know what you're short. So the first thing you want to do is remove the screw out of the collars. These are self-tapping plastic screws, and so if you over tighten them, you can strip them out. So you need to make sure that anytime you're removing or installing these screws that you don't over tighten them, or you'll damage the plastic part. You should not need to remove the set screws. They're protruding out a little bit. They should not be protruding into the slot, and you'll get to that in a later step. And the same thing, you don't want to over tighten these screws or you will strip out the plastic. So the first thing you want to do is take your big eyes. I like to rotate my power zoom all the way to the right, so you want to make sure they're both rotated all the way to the right. Take your collar, and the set screw is always going to be to the inside of the eyepiece you're putting it on. So this one goes on like this. This one, you want to turn it, and it's going to go on like this. Where the eyepiece is almost touching, there's barely enough room for these to clear, and you might have to work them around a little bit to get them in there. Now I put them about halfway on the rubber like so. You want them to be lined up. The other thing you want to do is you want to have them at 1 o'clock and at 7 o'clock. You have to work it around because mine are snug, my eyes are pretty narrow. And you want to verify that this is going to be good, because you never want the belt to come past straight up and down on the top or in the bottom. So this one's off just a teeny bit, one little tooth. And we'll do the same thing here. We'll check this, make sure when we come across, it's straight up and down. I'm off about one tooth. And then you're going to want to tighten those on with the screw. So take your screw, stick it in there. You want to tighten this up just enough to where the gap is closed. Doesn't need to be any tighter than that. The little teeth in the plastic part mesh with the knurling in the rubber. We're not compressing the rubber, we're just clamping it around there snugly. Same thing here. When you rotate it up, pinch it together so it doesn't turn. Same thing again, just tighten it up until the gap closes. That's all you need to do. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to double check again, make sure I'm at 1 and 7, and that where the belt comes out of these slots is not past 12 or 6. All right, we're good. So now we're on to the next step. This next step, again, you got to turn them all the way one way or the other way. I prefer all the way counterclockwise. You're going to take the short belt now, and you're going to take your super glue and your toothpicks. The first step is you want the teeth to be up. You want to put some super glue on the back of this belt. You're going to slide it into the slot till it starts coming out the other side, just a teeny bit. And then you're going to wedge the toothpicks in there from both sides. And that's going to hold the glue in place. And you're going to do the same thing. Rotate this one all the way counterclockwise now, or clockwise, and then rotate this one up so they're all the way over. You're going to do the same thing. Put your super glue in here. run your belt through. You want to pull it snug, and I always start on the inside with a toothpick. That keeps the tension on the belt. Wedge it in there. Come in here and wedge this one in. And you want to make sure that when you're pulling this one all the way this way and all the way this way, it doesn't give. So the belt needs to be tight. Now you're going to let that set. Okay, so before you move on to the next step, I kind of do the same thing. I check. I run this one all the way over till it stops and make sure that I can't move this one any further. And the same thing with this one. I run this one all the way over and make sure that when I push it, I'm not getting any slack in the belt. So I'm good to move on to the next step. And what I do is I take a razor blade and I trim off this extra length of the belt. You use a knife or a razor blade, whichever you have that's good and sharp. The belts are kind of tough. They need to be so they don't stretch on you over repeated use. Okay, so now we're ready to put the opposing belt on. And the way these things work, these teeth are going to mesh when you get them on. And so the teeth have to jump over one another. There's enough clearance in this slot to allow the teeth to jump until you get it in place. Once you get it in place, you'll tighten the set screws up enough to close the gap. The set screws are not clamping this together. They're just closing the gap so the teeth can't jump. So you want to make sure you're not over tightening these set screws because that's not their job to clamp this. They're just closing the gap. And you'll see I've got the ends trimmed off where there's no teeth. So you can rotate it all the way up to start with. Feed your little fishtail through there till it comes out this side. And you'll feel the teeth jumping. You want to jump it up to where you got, good teeth in there. It takes a little bit of force, right? Then rotate this around. And you'll see we've got good teeth right here. So the same thing, you'll fish this in here till the pigtail comes through. You might have to get some needle nose pliers or something to pull them tight. Sometimes I'll take my screwdriver and have something to pull with. And it takes a little bit of force, and that's what you want because you don't want this thing slipping. Try this one. I got a little more over here. There we go. So now you want to move these back and forth. This belt doesn't want to get loose. And the same thing with this one. This one's nice and snug. So you just want them to have some tension on them. And you can go through range of motion like that and make sure nothing gives. And then all you want to do is just snug this down. And it's set up to where the screws, when they're flush with the top, that's really all you need is to go about flush with the top. And you got to be really careful. You don't want to over tighten them. You'll strip out the plastic. There you have it. Now the belts are what's driving everything. The plastic is just holding the eyepieces so they're in sync. Again, when you do full range of motion, if you get it all the way this way and all the way this way and you push, none of the belts are loose. Pull it this way, right? Push this one, it's not loose. And it's all the way against the hard stop. So that's it. You can leave the pigtails the way they are, If you want to take it apart in the future and redo anything, or you can trim them off flush, whichever you prefer. I like to trim mine off flush because I don't want that piece hanging there. So I'll just trim that off. Like that. Same thing on this one. Let's go ahead and trim them off. These belts are pretty tough, so it takes a good sharp razor blade to do that. And there you have it. If you have any issues, give Eric or me a call. We'll walk you through the process. If you're still having issues and you're locally in Mesa or in Tucson, we'll get together and we'll help you install them. But it's pretty straightforward. Most guys will get it all figured out. Thanks for your business. Okay, so there's been a lot of questions about phone scopes. If you're using a phone scope like this that just simply goes over the eyepiece, it will not interfere whatsoever with the Z-Sync collars. And also as a note, in case a lot of guys don't realize this, once these are set to this eye width, you can't make the eyepieces wider because the bands will prevent that from happening. And if you run your eyepieces narrower, then these get slack in them and they won't be synced anymore. So these Z-Sync collars are specifically, once you have your big eye set up for you, then you can put these collars on and it's set for your eye spacing. You cannot adjust them after the fact. It's just not going to work. You can, but you'd have to redo the bands. So they're really set up for the individual and that particular eye spacing for them to work properly.